Hey everyone, so I want to start this off by saying if you're subscribed, please check the notification bell because I think my videos aren't getting out to my subscribers. I'll never understand YouTube's algorithm with that. So with that said, if you guys like the video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and sit back and relax. So I live in a major city where Lyft and Uber get used so often just because of the nightlife. Last week, I was going to meet my friends at a bar downtown, and I took a Lyft, so I didn't have to worry about parking or drunk driving. I ordered my Lyft and 10 minutes later, he arrived. He was an older man, maybe in his 70s, thick accent, and very frail. Because of his age and fragility, I wasn't scared, which I normally would be when riding late with an unknown male. So I got in the car and said good evening, to which I got no reply. Normally I put my headphones on so I don't have to make conversation with my driver. But since he was quiet from the beginning, I didn't have to. About 5 minutes into the ride, he turns the volume up on his stereo and puts in a CD. Immediately, I start hearing moaning noises and look up from my phone, thinking he's playing adult films. However, it turns out to be a song, with the entirety of the background noise being moaning. The lyrics are even worse, and I immediately take my headphones out to listen to my own music. Closer to my destination, he takes a wrong turn into a one-way street, closed off and dimly lit. At this point, I'm very aware and turn my music all the way down. He slows down so much to the point where I think he's going to stop the car. At this point, I'm unbuckled and ready to run, when he turns around and stares at me, not saying a single word. I immediately call my friend and tell her I'm close and to come meet me outside. He finally gets back into the main street, and we reach the destination. When I try to open the door, I discover he had a child lock on the whole time, but thankfully, my friend recognized me and opened the door. I leave right away. Before I do anything, I report him on the app. Thankfully, nothing happened to me, but the whole encounter was so strange and creepy, I had to share it. So this happened several months ago. At that time, I had recently lost my car due to a motor vehicle accident, so I walked for 30 minutes to the store, thinking I'd be able to beat the sunset back, but I was wrong. By the time I was done picking up my grocery, it was pitch black outside. The thing is, I live in a woodsy area where there are not even many sidewalks, so I didn't think it was safe to walk back. I tried getting my brother and cousin to pick me up and drop me off, but they wouldn't have been able to make it for a while. So instead, I decided to get a Lyft. A photo of a suspicious-looking creepy old man popped up as my driver. I waited at the sidewalk for my ride, and maybe like 10 minutes later, the driver arrived. It was a silver Toyota sedan, and the driver was an old man, wearing a cap and a large framed, rectangular glasses. Instantly, something felt off about the man's aura, but I tried not to let it bother me too much. After all, my home is literally down the street, I reminded myself. I asked him if I could set my groceries in the trunk of his car. He nodded. I dropped it in without noticing what was in the trunk of his vehicle, because where we were stopped, it was pretty dark with no street lamps. I helped myself into the car and told him that I live back there, pointing in the direction from which the vehicle had arrived, and let him know that it was only a 3-minute drive from my home. I saw him nod, or so I thought, and as soon as the lights switched to green, he made a right. I thought he was making the right to turn the vehicle around, but instead he drove past the main road he was supposed to take to get me home. I let him know immediately that my home was that way, while pointing in the direction, and he acknowledged it, but still kept going straight, claiming there was an issue with his GPS, and he started driving us in the complete opposite direction of my home, where the roads were completely empty. I suddenly didn't feel safe. I had a terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. In that moment of panic, I immediately reached for my phone to SOS, assuming the worst. But then I stopped myself and told myself to calm down. Make a U-turn, I tried to tell the driver as calmly as possible. I didn't want him to hear the panic in my voice. He didn't respond. My request to turn around was completely ignored. I couldn't keep calm any longer, so I finally yelled for him to make a right and turn around. He reluctantly complied. Along the way back to the road that took me to my home, it felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life. But just when I thought I'd finally be home safe. The driver then suggested an alternate route, even though my home was simple, right, and a right via the main road, and very close by. I immediately felt that something was really, really wrong. He slowed down next to a woodsy, isolated path along the way, asking if I'd ever been that way before, and that we could take this route instead. I froze. Again, I went into panic mode, but forced myself to calm down so as not to let it be known that I was suspicious of him. I raised my voice once more, telling him my home was that way, while pointing toward the main road, which wasn't very far. He finally obliged, after some reluctancy, and started driving back toward the main road again. The entire time on my way to my home, my heart was racing, and my palms were sweating. We arrived to my complex maybe 5 minutes later, and I spoke to him very nicely so that he doesn't try something funny that would force him to react in such a manner that would put my life in further danger. I told him I'd be tipping him well for such a short drive, which should be $10. I quickly hopped out of the car and jolted to the trunk to retrieve my grocery. As I grabbed my bags, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, because this time the street lamps surrounding my complex illuminated the trunk of the car. I froze as I grabbed my grocery. In the trunk of his vehicle was a rope and mallet and a bag filled with some contents. I was trembling from fear. I ran up to my building so fast and checked outside my window as soon as I got up to my apartment to make sure he wasn't still lurking and watching. But thankfully, I never had to hear or see from that old man again. My guess was that he had some evil, twisted intentions, which I miraculously escaped, because for whatever reason, he decided to change his mind about the intentions he had for me that night. To this day, I can only guess as to what his intentions were, but judging by the items I found in the trunk of his vehicle, it's not something I would have ever had to wish to find. I was so glad I trusted my instinct that day. So this happened over Memorial Weekend. Note the driver had since been reported, and we were considering taking matters to the police. I spent the weekend with 2 girlfriends in Vegas. We decided to call a lift to old Las Vegas. The Lyft driver was an older man from Greece. Seemed friendly enough in the beginning of the ride, and no red flags yet. He started asking one of my friends questions that could be used to map out where exactly her neighborhood is without actually asking directly where she lives. Asking her questions like what state she's from, what town, and what kind of stores were near her hometown, and how far away they are to her. Specifically Costco. First red flag went off. Second red flag went off when we realized what should have been only a 10-minute drive was now getting closer to half an hour ride. And we had somehow ended up back at the resort we had started the trip from. We all noticed that now, and asked why we did a loop like that. He answered with some type of non-answer at this point, which none of us understood, and kept driving. It was almost as if he was trying to test how drunk we were, and if we would notice. At this point, no one is talking to him anymore, and he keeps rambling. One of my friends has now texted her mom, and I have Google Maps out now to make sure he's taking us to the right location. He then mentioned something about taking us to check out the destination we requested, and then taking us to a nicer part of that area if we don't like it. Third red flag, and I'm angry now. No more being friendly. All too often, women have to choose between friendly or not to stay safe around men. This was a moment where I needed to make it clear. He was taking us to our destination or else. I angrily say, absolutely not. We're going to where we asked to be taken, thinking he can easily mark us as dropped off, then take us to a destination where we have no idea what's waiting for us there. Blank expression on his end, and no reaction to my anger. Just keeps rambling. But this spot is better. He eventually drops us off in the right place, and we quickly get out. What's scary about this man is that he had 15,000 plus ratings, and if this were an attempt to kidnap, he must be a part of a larger operation. So this happened like 4 to 5 years ago, when I was like 17 years old. I had a girlfriend. I'm also a girl. And I was at her house for the day. At this time, I didn't have a good relationship with my mom, so I would sleep for weeks at my best friend's house. So I realize it's like 1 a.m. and I decide to call an Uber, as I live in a kind of small city, so buses stop passing by at 10 p.m. approximately. I call the Uber and ask it to wait at the end of the block so it wouldn't have to take an unnecessary turn. When it got there, my girlfriend went with me so we can say goodbye. We hugged and kissed, but that kind of kiss that lasts like 2 seconds. I waved to her as I turned to sit on the passenger seat of the car and say hello to the driver. He replied my greeting and started driving. He looked okay at first, but I was really wrong. He was in his early 40s, his head was shaved, and had a large tattoo on his arm. He asked me if I was a student, and I replied yes. Then he asked what I was studying at college, and I told him that I was actually at my last year of high school. He said that I looked a lot older, and I just laughed awkwardly. This is when things started going down. The conversation went something like this. From Psycho, was that your girlfriend? The girl you kissed? Me. Oh yeah. Psycho, how long have you been together? Me. A year and a half? Psycho, whoa, that's a really long time. Are you a lesbian? Why? Psycho, don't be ashamed. I'm not homophobic or something. I actually really like lesbians. Me. Oh. Psycho, so are you? How do you have sex if none of you has a dick? Me. I really don't want to talk about that. Psycho, sex is normal. I want to know how you do it. Me. Psycho, have you ever been with a man? Me. Sorry, but I don't think it's appropriate to talk about this. Psycho, I've always wanted to experiment a bit and have a threesome with 2 girls. Do you like men? Me. Not really. Psycho, it's okay, we don't have to literally have sex. I could just stand there and look as I touch myself. Me, we're not interested in that kind of stuff. Psycho, how do you know if you don't like men if you have never been with one? Have you ever wondered how it's like? Friendly reminder that I was 17 at the time, my girlfriend's 16, and this creep was kind of 40. At this point I'm freaking out. The guy was taking another route to take longer to arrive at my friend's house, and I remember thinking, well, these are my last moments of life. This guy is taking me somewhere else. Maybe it sounds a bit extreme, but where I live is not that uncommon that this kind of stuff happens. I'm an atheist, but a fucking miracle happened, and my friend called me. I put him on speaker, and he asked me how much more I'm going to take, because he was worried. So I replied that the Uber driver is taking another route, but I'll be there soon, and asked him to wait for me at the front door. The creep panicked and took me to my friend's house. I opened the door and ran as fast as I could to hug my friend. At the moment I walked in the house, I just fell to the ground and cried my soul out. I genuinely thought I would die that day. Stay